So my name is Mack Rutherford. I'm 17 years old, and on the 24th of August, I ended my journey to become the youngest person to fly solo around the world. It took about 5 months, and it brought me through some of the most incredible places around the world. Brought me through the Sahara Desert, brought me through Central Africa, the Indian Ocean as well, the Pacific Ocean, India, across Southeast Asia, across the entirety of the east and west coast of the US, Mexico, and then the Atlantic Ocean. It was an incredible experience, and throughout my journey, I was trying to show the young people could make a difference, that you didn't have to be 18 to do something special, but you just follow your dreams and they can eventually come true.
And they certainly did. You are a legend at 17, and you're still like, are you in high school or are you in, you said university, are you in dual enrollment? What are you in right now?
No, so I'm in high school at the moment, but in my final year, so I'm working very hard to try and catch up on all the time missed, so I can then apply for universities.
Very good. So do you mind if we jump into some of the questions?
Yes, of course.
Okay, and I know I already asked some of them because I was super curious, but some of the kids, they want to know from start to finish, what were some of the more memorable places that you went to?
So there were many, every flight was completely different and incredible, but I would say some of the parts that really stood out for me was flying through the Sahara Desert, flying where just hundreds of miles you have nothing but desert. It's incredible. Flying through Kenya, being able to see all the national parks, flying over the Indian Ocean, flying through Southeast Asia probably. Then probably the biggest highlight in my journey was when I landed on an uninhabited island in the Pacific Ocean. It was incredible. I'd flown for 10 hours over the Pacific, and I landed on a deserted island where there was absolutely no one, and just being able to experience that and just being able to look around an island that had no one had really gone onto for over 10 years was just incredible. And then probably the flying through New York, it was an incredible, it was amazing just being able to fly really low level past the city, flying around Statue of Liberty, just seeing everything from so close. And then Greenland was also probably one of my biggest highlights, just flying past icebergs, flying really low over the ice caps. They were all views I'd never seen before and views that really marked me.
Absolutely phenomenal. So do you mind, I'm going to have some kids themselves ask some questions. This is Gabrielle in Italy. Gabrielle, you had a really good question. Go ahead and unmute to ask Mac.
Hi, nice to meet you, Mac. How had you managed the traveling with school?
So that was a real issue for me. So when I set out, I was supposed to only take about 2 to 3 months, and I set it up that I was going to try and do it through my holidays. But I had huge amounts of delays, and it ended up being 5 months. And during my entire journey, I did no school at all. So then when I came back, I had to do huge amounts of catching up. And I've just been working basically for the past 3 months extremely hard trying to get back all the school time I missed.
That is intense. So one of the kids wanted to know, at any point, did it ever cross your mind that you might not make it?
Well, basically, from the time I started in Sofia, Bulgaria to Japan, well, actually to the US, For the first 3 months, it basically I couldn't complete my journey. Due to the Russian-Ukraine war, I wasn't able to fly through Russian airspace as a French microlight. And I was also not able to fly through Japanese airspace because of my type of airplane. So when I started my journey, it wasn't that I might be able to get around the world. It's currently impossible for me to fly around the world. Um, but as I was progressing through the journey, I was able to get, for the first time in history, a Japanese exemption. And for the first time in history, the Japanese allowed my type of aircraft into their airspace, which was an incredible experience, which then allowed me to fly directly from there to the uninhabited island in the Pacific Ocean. So that was definitely a lot of stressful moments, those first 3 months when I had no idea if I was even going to be able to complete my journey. But eventually it all worked out. I just kept going and I was able to complete my journey.
That is phenomenal. Wow, the first in history. So we have Lewis, and I believe Lewis is in Spain or France. Lewis, you should be able to unmute. You had a pretty good question. Go ahead and unmute to ask. I can ask. So they wanted to know, how did you originally get the opportunity to fly?
So both my parents are pilots, so I've really grown around in an aviation background. And when I was the age of 8, I for the first time held the controls of an aircraft, and I was very scared at that point. But very quickly it subsided, and I really started to love aviation. So it's really has been a big part of my life, but that doesn't stop anyone else from trying it. I really recommend anyone who wants to go flying. There are huge amounts of small airfields, small airstrips anywhere where there are always instructors who will happily take you flying from an instructor or even teach you how to fly to get your license.
That is absolutely exciting stuff. And guys, again, keep the questions coming in the chat. You don't need to put your hand up. So Victor had a very good question, and we'll go with a few more and then we'll let you go, Matt, because we know it's getting kind of late there. But Victor, go ahead and ask.
Right. So, hello. I'd like to know what kind of planes have you flown with?
So did you get that? What kind of planes have you flown in your career?
Yes. So the aircraft I learnt on is called the Coyote 2. It's a very small 2-seater microlight that I flew around through Belgium, and that's the one I got my license with. Then I did a lot of flying with my parents, and those ones I did different ones. So I did Piper Saratoga, an RV-10, a Cessna, I did one of the Cessnas. But then when I flew around the world, I did it in a Shark. The reason I chose the Shark is it's actually the fastest microlight in the world, and it was incredibly important that I could get to my destination as quickly as possible in a very safe and timely manner.
So we've had this question come up quite a few times. How fast, like max out, how fast does that plane fly at?
So the thing is, I didn't fly it at maximum speed all the time, but if I were to go max speed, it can go about 160 nautical miles, which would be 160 knots, which would be not entirely sure in miles, but it's about a little over 300 kilometers an hour.
That is that's a few hundred miles an hour. So one of the kids wanted to know, how many countries have you been to in all?
In my around the world journey, I did 29 countries, I believe, around 30 countries. So yeah, that was cool.
Very cool. Dana in Spain, you had a pretty cool question. I was wondering this myself. Go ahead to unmute to ask.
Weren't you scared when you were traveling all alone without talking to anyone?
So that was definitely one of the things I really had to prepare for. So before I flew around the world, I did 2 crossings of the Atlantic Ocean with my dad just to prepare myself. but the big one was just on the trip. I had to just learn how to do it on my own. I had to, so it started off with crossing the Sahara Desert. I would go a few hours without talking, but then finally the the time I had to really concentrate for and make sure that everything was okay was on my flight to the abandoned island, because it was a 10-hour flight, the longest by far, and 9 hours of that flight I had no radio contact at all. I was out of radio contact. So if anything had happened at all, I had no way of communicating that to the Japanese or the Russians or the Americans. So it's something I really had to learn on the way. But it's something I managed to deal with and just kept going. And that's how I knew I really wanted to fly around the world, and so I pushed myself to do it.
Now, this is kind of might be a weird question, but how, like, the idea, first of all, how did the idea come up? And then second of all, how did you convince your parents to be cool with this?
So actually my sister became the youngest woman to fly solo around the world. So about a year ago, she did her own journey around the world, and I thought that's an incredible thing. I would like to do something similar. So I set about doing it. My parents were very, very hesitant to begin with, but I was able to convince them with time, lots of time, that this was something I really wanted to do, that it wasn't just because I wanted, I don't know, whatever. I really wanted to fly around the world. And I was finally able to convince them, and then I was able to prepare and set off. So, yeah.
Well, we thank you for, if you could thank them on our behalf, because you're definitely inspiring a whole bunch of people here. We have Cleophie in France, I believe. Go ahead and unmute to ask, friend.
Did you make friends?
So I met lots and lots of people, but I was very, very busy. I don't know if I really had enough time to make friends, as it were. But I met lots of interesting people around the world. It was incredible to meet them, just seeing how they reacted, how they were different, how their lives were ran in different ways than I'd known. And although I probably didn't make friends, because I would go in every style, would be 2 days here, 1 day here, 3 days here. I was still able to meet lots of really kind and really cool people around the world. And that was an amazing experience in itself.
Absolutely. One of the kids wanted to know, how were you able to communicate with people when you didn't speak the same language, or did you always have translators with you?
So that was actually one of the weird things I wasn't expecting. I was able to speak to English basically everywhere in the world. So it was, whether I was I could be anywhere in the world and they would basically speak English. The only parts I really had trouble communicating was in northern Japan, but also quite strangely in Sicily. I could have been in the middle of the Sahara Desert and people spoke English, but when I was in Sicily, I wasn't able to speak either French or English to them, which was really difficult. But in the end, Google Translate works perfectly for that.
Technology wins again. Very awesome. So one of the kids, they wanted to know, do you have any plans for after you finish university to do more traveling, or are you focused on something else?
So I'm definitely going to keep flying, but I'm not entirely sure in which area of aviation. I know I really love flying small airplanes, but I'm not sure in which area. I don't know if I want to do ferry flying, which is flying small airplanes to different places, or if I want to join the Air Force, or I have no idea yet, just that I'm going to keep flying and keep trying to find new goals in my life.
Absolutely. I had a question. This comes from myself. So were there any cultural issues that you came across, or any like funny stories?
What do you mean?
I mean by like cultural differences, where it's something that seemed normal to you being from England and Belgium, and then you get to some random place and they're like, what is this guy doing?
Probably, but I can't think of any for the moment. I haven't had that question yet. I don't think I can answer that right now. I can't think of anything, but this is probably one of the things that I'm gonna at 8 o'clock tonight. I'm gonna suddenly realize, oh, that was this really cool story. I've just
Shoot me an
completely
email. You're
Yeah.
fine. We'll do a couple more questions. One of the kids wanted to know, what is the most beautiful country that you got to see if you had to pick one place that you flew over and you're like, wow.
It's difficult to pinpoint one country because they're so different to each other. But if there's one place I would really want to go back to, it's probably Greenland. It's completely out of this world. You have huge ice caps everywhere, and just surrounding it, you have icebergs. It's an incredible place to fly, but also just being able to stay there. You can go walking on, go on, climb a mountain right next to you, and you'll have the most amazing view. And it's just, it was an incredible experience. And yeah, that's probably the one place I would like to go back to as soon as possible.
That is so cool. So in Greenland, it's how far is that from you anyway in England?
The Greenland,
Yeah. How far is that from you?
um, it's quite far. By small airplane, it's quite far. It's probably a 5-hour commercial flight.
Okay.
But yeah, it's midway between America and Europe.
That's incredible. So before we let you go, because I know it's getting kind of late for you as well as some of our other students, what kind of advice would you have for these kids as they kind of go off into the world and figure out what they want to do? You are somebody who's done the absolute unthinkable, and you're not even, old enough to vote, at least here in America. And so what kind of advice would you have for them as they go off into the world and figure out what kind of trails they would like to blaze?
So what I would really say is follow your dreams, whatever it may be, whether it's aviation or carpentry, whatever it is, just work as hard as possible towards them. As I said before, when I set off, it was not that it was improbable I was going to complete it. It was actually impossible. But I set off anyway because I really wanted to make it work. I really wanted to fly around the world. So whatever your goal may be, just try and work towards it. And even if you end up failing, you will know that you've taken that step, and just go for it. Just take that first step towards making your goals come true.
Mack, you are a huge inspiration, not only to the kids in the world, but the adults of the world, that there are no limits. And we can't thank you enough, guys. Check out macksolo.com if you haven't already. We thank everyone for joining us today, tonight, and this morning, wherever you're at in the world. And Mack, before I end the meeting for all, this is kind of a tradition, what we do. I'm going to let everyone unmute to thank you, and then I'm going to shut the meeting down. Can we all say thank you to Mack for spending time out of his very valuable
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Mack.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.